Bees. I'm your host, Dave Westcott, and I've got with me co-host Scott the Beekeeper.
Good morning, everybody.
Scott. How are you today?
Good morning. I wonder what word you were going to say there for a second. You co-host.
Co-host?
Coach?
Coast?
Coaster.
I don't know if that's a nice thing to do to people. I don't know if that's very nice.
What?
Are you one of those people who pick on people if they don't get a word out right?
Am I one of those people?
Is that the kind of guy
It is
you are?
early in the morning. I give grace. I just wondered what you were going to call me. I was anticipating like a new name.
You? I wasn't going to call you anything bad.
Okay. Well, I hope not. It's on the podcast forever.
I've seen,
yes.
People who can be a little smart alecky can tend to get beat up every once in a while.
Well.
Has that ever happened to you in your life?
I have not gotten beat up. No.
Oh, well,
no.
listen.
But the bees have beat me up a little bit.
That's something everybody should experience.
I disagree with that.
A good whooping will definitely change your mindset.
I did get spanked as a kid though.
Did you?
Yep, 100%.
How many times?
I don't know. I never counted. I mean, it wasn't a ton. Like I was a fairly okay child. I followed the rules for the most part, but turned out okay.
Are you going to spank your children when you grow up?
We'll see. I don't want that on public record necessarily. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. Who knows?
Well, listen, we want to make sure that we're talking about bees because This is Teach Me Bees, even though it's fun to rap about some other things going on.
Yep.
So we've got hives out in the field. We've got pollination contracts out on blueberries, and we've got pollination contracts out on apples. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we're experiencing here today is some queen loss.
Yeah, a little bit.
We've lost some queens. So
a little bit.
Out of about 100 hives or so, we've lost, 7 or 8 queens?
So last time I got in the hives, which was late last week, I marked about 16 hives that I was unsure about the queen status. So in that, you kind of get in your hives and you check, okay, is this a weak hive? Just general population. Is this, strong or weak, just on first observation? And then you look for brood. Is there, maybe it's a weaker population, but there's a lot of brood, which means it's going to start exploding, growing, which is great. If you don't see a lot of brood, which some of these I didn't see a lot of brood in, and I saw a lot more honey production, they're making, I saw pollen in there and such. Then you have a little bit of questions. Okay, is this not a good queen? Did they replace the queen and then, they didn't get a new one, right? Perhaps they replaced her and then the supersedure queen went out for their mating flight and didn't come back. That's possible. We've had very rough weather up and down. It's very windy. That can make the return of the queen from the mating flight difficult. And, she could potentially die on that flight. It's not a guarantee that she comes back. She'll fly for 3 or 4 days and be back. And there's no guarantee that she comes back. Most of the time she will. But you never know for sure. So maybe the new queen disappeared, vanished on the flight. So you look for those kinds of things, and with RBs and how many there are together and stuff, there should be some good mating that happens if they have a natural supersede queen, and that's fine, not a big deal. So yeah, we got a little bit of queen issues.
16 hives.
Yeah, and that kind of happens sometimes if you move them or if they're new hives being installed. Sometimes the queen gets rejected, and that's just part of it. The bees didn't like the new queen. So there's a variety of factors. And so we have, a little bit of queen loss.
How many of those hives would you say don't have good brood?
Of those 16, probably 10 to 12 have very little to minimal brood, and so that's a key marker. Okay, there's some kind of queen issue. Queen's not here. She's not laying brood. Which either one of those, we're going to need a new queen, right?
So about half?
Yeah, maybe a little bit more.
And then
2/3
out of the remainder of the hives, what, you just couldn't find the queen and everything looked okay?
Couldn't find the queen. Maybe the hive population was strong, but I didn't see a ton of brood, which just makes me like, okay, I need to keep my eye on this one, and we need to determine if we need a new queen or not. So not necessarily in a bad position, but could be needing to replace a queen. And so, yeah, those are just, ones that we had queen question marks with.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And how does that impact the hive? What if there is no queen in the hive? How long will the hive last for?
It's a ticking time bomb in a sense. Bees are going to live 40, 45 days. And so you're going to have that long for the cycle to die out in the hive. So if there's no brood and you want to, there's a couple of ways you could go about it. If you wanted to say you had a hive that you're like, man, this is a little bit weak, but you got worker bees, maybe you have some nurse bees, you just look a little weak, I don't see a lot of brood, you could take brood from a strong hive, drop the frame in. If that weak hive does not have a queen, you couldn't find the queen, whatever, you could put brood with egg or larvae in there, and then they'll make it into a supersede your queen. So they'll make their own queen out of that, and then that'll take a few weeks for that queen to come out. So you could, in a way, manipulate that hive to continue on and not just die out. Or you could just buy a new queen and plop a new queen in there. Or if you're able to make your own queens quicker or on demand, like if you have a supply waiting, then you could just drop that queen in there.
And how do you make that queen again?
There's a few different ways. There's artificial insemination and different stuff like that. I'm not an expert in any of that. You can have like a mating nuke, which are small boxes that you have drones in, and you introduce a queen cell into that. The queen emerges, and rather than having to go out on this long mating flight, she'll mate in there. Will fly out. She'll come right back in. And that the mating has happened and everything, and it's a little more controlled environment for queen rearing. So there's different guys. I've heard some that have like really big commercial yards where they have like a base hive, and then on top they have this queen mating nuke, and so that they know where to come back from. And then there's drones from the underhive that will fly out as well and be able to mate with the queen. So that's like it's a whole nother way of going about queen rearing.
What's the time frame that you have to determine whether these hives don't have queens, whether they do have queens, whether you need to replace the queens? What does that timeline look like?
Like about right now, we probably have the next week to week and a half to make a decision on the queens, so that by the we're recording this in the early July or early June, so that by the third-ish week of June, the hive is getting back into its growth, and the queen is in the hive, and broods are being laid, and that kind of thing. The longer you delay, the weaker the hive's going to be for the winter, for the long term. The less honey supply you're going to have, because basically for these hives that are struggling for whatever reason or just weaker, the longer they don't have a queen is like a longer in pause on their production. It's like, it'd be like a job, or let's just say a sports team, and they fire their coach mid-season and they just don't replace their coach. You're kind of going to be treading water. You're not going to be
You'd kind of be like
better.
an Oregon Duck.
We don't got to throw shade at it. We have a great coach.
Wait a minute.
We have a great coach.
Okay, that's awesome. Maybe they'll beat the Huskies this year.
I'm hoping so. If not, we have issues.
I know we do. All right. So nice to know. So you've got about 5-7 days, couple days. You've got to make a decision on.
Yeah. Yep.
Say, how much does a new queen cost if you go buy one?
It'll depend on your supplier, maybe $40-$50, somewhere in there. So
okay. So 16 queens is a lot of money. That's like $800.
Decent chunk of change. Yeah, for sure. So.
And then how long does it take to rear them yourself?
It's going to take them 16-ish days once the queen cell is actually formed. So if it's an egg, They have about 3 days the worker bees do to feed it, to make it into that queen cell. So it's gonna, it's gonna be almost 3 weeks from when that takes place for that queen to emerge.
Is it
She's gonna
better to have a
mate.
natural queen or a purchased queen?
It's a little subjective. Depends. If you want, it's going to be cheaper to have a natural one, right? Because you're not buying one. You take on a little bit more risk with, you have to wait for that queen to emerge. Something could, in theory, happen to the hive. It's not likely, but something could. And then the queen goes on the mating flight. What if she doesn't return? There's a little bit of risk there. It's likely she will. Especially as weather gets better and better and better, and it's less rainy and gloomy and, tougher conditions on the bees. If you were to purchase a queen, then you could just drop them in immediately and restart the hive immediately. And you'll have probably better honey production from that hive. But also, you have to pay a little bit of money to make that happen. So it depends on what you want to do. Those are kind of your options with a queen issue.
Okay, so we're looking at the queens, and now it's really tough because you actually have to get in to the hive.
Yeah.
And it's been very wet and very windy.
Yeah, we've had here in Western Washington like 2 days, maybe 3, 2.5, where it's 60 to 65, okay weather, but then it's windy.
There's been flood warnings,
and then it goes, and then we got 4 days of rain and wind, and literally flood warnings the last 3 days. So
and
it's not been
to be nice. It's not supposed to stop raining until what, Friday, Saturday?
Last I saw was Thursday should be a quality day. I don't know for sure. You got to take it in stride a little bit.
So Friday might be a day when you're.
Yeah, I'm hoping Thursday, Friday can be days that I'm able to get in the hives, look at them, determine specifically those ones. All right, how bad is it? Do we need to replace you? And then we make the decision on.
And how are you looking for the queen?
You pull out every single frame. If you pull out the frame and you see egg and larvae, you don't really need to look for the queen. The queen was in there in the last 3 days. So the egg, it's going to be an egg for 3 days before it becomes larvae, and then it's going to get capped and such. So if you see that, you're good. You don't really need to look. If you don't see that, or if you just don't see a lot of brood to begin with, then you need to go frame by frame, look for the queen. You may not be able to find her. She may have jumped off the frame and is literally in the bottom of the box. And that's going to be tough to see,
Yeah.
There's only so much you can do to see that. So you have to make your best guess in that instance. Does it look weak? How long has this queen been here? Do we need to replace the queen? Or maybe the queen is not there anymore, and you kind of just have to make a judgment call at that point. If you just cannot find the queen. So, but if you see the queen and the hive looks like they're doing all right, drop it back in. You don't need to inspect anymore. There's no reason to keep digging around, especially with the weather not being the best. It's like the least amount of breaking into the hive, the better, because you're setting the bees' production back by doing that. Their honey gathering and such, or honey making.
And how often are you in the hives?
I'm shooting for about every week and a half or so right now. It's weather dependent though. So we're working with, we're trying to do what days are the best that week. Go visit some of the hives, feed them. So not every time do I feed, do I do like a full inspection. Especially with the weather lately. Sometimes I'm just feeding and moving on. And I'll be able to open up the box and see is the population strong or low, and that'll just give me indication on, okay, next time I'm here, I need to check this hive more intentionally, kind of thing. So
that's awesome. What's the difference between a bumblebee and a honeybee?
A bumblebee, I think bumblebees are kind of cool. They one, I'm not gonna lie, I like Bumblebee from Transformers. That's back to my childhood. That's a Transformers 1, good movie. After that, all downhill. But the Bumblebee, it's bigger if you compare it to a honeybee. It's black, looks like a black ball. It's interesting. I've actually seen some flying around our yard, which means that they're in the area.
Yeah.
They nest underground though, so they don't nest like in a traditional hive like a honeybee would. Their population's way, way smaller, maybe a few hundred at most in their nest, whereas honeybee hives are tens of thousands, 20,000, 30, 40, 50,000 bees. So just a lot smaller. They don't make a lot of honey. That's not what they're known for. They'll make honey enough in their nest to survive, but that's it. So if you're wanting to make honey or extract honey, you're not getting them from a bumblebee. That's just not happening.
They're just kind of nice to look at.
Yeah, they're good. They're good pollinators, like a honeybee. They're good pollinators. They tend to kind of stay near one location, where a honeybee hive, and probably because there's a lot more of them, are quicker to move to a new location for pollination. Obviously, their hive stays where they're at, but if it's within a quarter mile, they might, all right, let's go out to 3/4 of a mile. Let's move on. We already kind of hit this area, where the bumblebee will just kind of stay more in its designated area. And the queen, interesting, the queens live 1 year as bumblebees, from fall to fall. That's just their cycle. They are born in the fall, overwinter, come out, start their own nest through the spring into the summer, and then into the fall, prepare to overwinter. They die off, and a new queen emerges, and just the cycle repeats.
Wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. So how do they get new queens?
They just grow them in their nest. Yeah.
So the nest is around every year.
The nest is around. Yeah. I think they use the same nest, although a new queen will go out also to find a new nest.
Do they go dormant in the winter?
Yeah, they're pretty dormant. Yeah.
And so do they just wake up in the springtime, ready to go?
They just, wake up out of their coma, ready to go. It's like sometimes you take a nap for like 3 hours and you wake up. What galaxy am I in? Right?
I love that nap.
It's great, but it's also a little concerning sometimes. You're like, what world event has happened that I missed out on because I've been gone for a decade or something like that?
That's an interesting comment. We could rabbit hole on that. We could take this down a different path.
We could go down a lot of paths.
We've got to stay focused on bees.
We have self-control.
We got to stay focused on bees. And I like how you tried to lure me into the Transformers comment there about Bumblebee in the first Star Wars movie or the first Transformers movie.
Yeah.
Star Wars and Transformers is all kind of the same, I suppose. Aliens.
Not at all.
Not at all.
George Lucas and Michael Bay are completely different masterminds.
In my mind, it's all the same. It goes into one place.
That's sad.
The recycling bin. Man, I'm zinging the team right now. I'm getting a lot of angry looks.
That one's getting us 1 stars.
I'm getting
for sure.
We already get enough of those. There's already enough haters that say, you lose topic. You don't focus on the topic. You bounce around like a pinball machine. I can't
bounce around like a bee.
Can't you stay focused on bees? I only want you to talk about bees. I think we do a really good job about talking about bees.
Yeah.
But
so let's talk a little bit more about these other.
We get a few haters out there.
Other bee types. We're kind of in our location. There's a few other bee types. One is the mason bee. As you talk with other beekeepers, or if you're trying to do pollination and you call farms and whatever, they might talk about just we let the native pollinators take care of our pollination. Typically, that's going to be mason bees. Mason bees are considered
They're
a
kind
native
of like a
pollinator. They're small. Yeah, they're definitely small. They're very interesting. They are great pollinators. If you compare one honeybee to one mason bee, the mason bee is going to be a better pollinator in and of itself. But they're very solitary. They don't really have a colony. So they are kind of by themselves, maybe in a very small group, but by and large solitary. Mason bee, every female mason bee is a queen bee, and so they have their own little nest area. They lay their eggs. She protects them. but it's not a big colony, that works together like a social honeybee, right? They're very different in structure and how they function, and they don't make honey. They're not a bee that makes any honey.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah. So
Last but
honey,
not least, we got carpenter bees.
yep, carpenter bees.
They build their own nests.
Yeah, they do. They're called carpenter bees because they typically make their nests within trees or wood structures. Thus, the carpenter. Sometimes they're called wood bees because that's just where they
Yep.
go, and they make very precise nests, like the holes that they make to get in, and the dimensions of their nests. It's all very precise, which is very, very interesting. However, they're also a very solitary bee. They don't have a colony. They might work in small groups together, but by and large, very solitary bees. Good pollinators. I wouldn't say in general as good as the mason bee, but they're a decent pollinating bee.
And again, another bee that doesn't make honey.
Yep, another bee. They don't make honey, at least not anything you would be able to get. They might make a little bit for their own hive to get through, but they don't. That's not something they do. So they're very interesting. Something that I found interesting about the carpenter bee is the male bees do not have stingers. They will be aggressive to try and ward off humans or threats from their hive area,
Sure.
from their nest, but they don't have stingers. It's the female bees that have stingers, and they can sting multiple times. They don't lose their stinger on human skin like the honeybee
Really?
does. Yeah. Yep.
And how many would be in a nest of carpenter bees?
I'm not entirely sure, but 100, not much. They're very solitary.
So they're like a group of banditos.
Yeah.
They're very small.
They
and
are, very small group.
deadly.
I mean, they could be. Sure. You are more likely to die from honeybee sting than carpenter sting because there's way more honeybees. And if you just get lit up,
How many bee stings does it take to kill someone?
I've heard like over 1,000.
Shoot.
But if you have an allergic reaction, then that's different, right? Depending on the severity of your reaction.
Your bee sting where you swelt up like Interstate Marshmallow Man.
Yeah, the Michelin Man on my left hand.
Does that mean that you have some allergic properties, or was that just the way
Potentially, I
it
don't
got
know.
you?
I don't really know. I've gotten stung a couple times since then, and nothing's happened. So I mean, it flares up a little bit in that section. But
maybe it just in that section. Maybe it just got a nerve.
maybe they got me good. It was like I know where to get you, and I'm gonna get you right there.
How did you get stung again?
One in the back of the head. Just I think my veil was against my head, and it just kind of. And the one in the back of the calf. It just.
Oh. That sounds like a painful sting.
That one definitely surprised me a little bit. I was like, oh, oh, and they always get you. They're really good about it. They get you when you're in the midst of looking at frames, and you got the hive open. So that way you have to have immense composure to not drop something. Because if you got a frame of bees that you just drop because you got stung, you're getting stung again and again and again. They ain't gonna be very happy. Right? And what if the queen was on that frame? You didn't know it. Bad.
How many times has Dave been stung lately?
I don't know, a couple. Nothing crazy. Yeah. I don't think he's been stung recently.
So the bee suit doesn't do a lot of prevention when it comes to stinging.
I mean, it definitely does. It definitely does. There are times that I've been in the hives, and we'll have to come have you out there soon, and maybe we'll do an episode out there or something where they're flying around all on my face. They're like bouncing off my chest because they're not very happy with me right now. And if I didn't have my suit on, I'm probably getting stung, like all those times. So the suit does wonders, but it's not magical.
Maybe you need to wear thicker clothes underneath the suit.
It gets hot. You know what I mean? Like it gets hot. So I don't really want to. But the mason bee, the bumblebee, the carpenter bee are 3 common other bees in our area, but they're not honeybees. They don't make honey. They're not very big in population. Basically, all bees are going to be good pollinators on some level. But obviously honeybees, there's going to be a lot more of them. And if you bring out 10 hives, 20 hives, 100 hives to your farm to pollinate, they're going to pollinate so much more because there's just so many of them in comparison to, a couple hundred of these other bees. So, I hope you learned a little bit about other types of bees, what we got going on, the queen rearing and the replacement queens that we're going through. Yeah. Did you have any closing thoughts on the episode, what we're doing?
Well, I think that one, honeybees are pretty cool.
Yes, they are.
They're doing a good job. Bumblebees was also interesting to learn that they are nesting underground and the queen is only living for 1 full year. Carpenter bees aren't producing any honey and they're burrowing exact holes into wood, trees, so on and so forth. So very interesting. Considered a native bee. The mason bee is a smaller bee like a fly, but one of the top pollinators out there. So that was really interesting. And then I thought just interesting was to talk about getting into the hives. And that out of 100 hives, 16 of them we can't find the queen. And we may be having a brood issue. We may be having some sort of growth issue, but we've got to get in there quick. We've got to make some decisions in the next week. And we've either got to decide to make our own queens, which seems more challenging, or we need to buy some queens to get in there, or potentially we'll lose those hives because the bees only last for 45 days. So running a bee farm, there are some pretty significant challenges that are continuing to come up because that nuke of bees had a cost to it. And so just letting it go is like, hey, how much revenue is being lost? How many pounds of potential honey is being lost? So that's got to be cleaned up and fixed. And then the weather has really been tough.
It's been not very good.
Not allowing us to get into the hives and do the checks and those sort of things that we need.
And also it's affected
to get done.
The bees going out to do pollination,
right.
When it's tough weather or rainy and they're not going out, it's tough. And the rain always washes away good nectar and pollen. And so it's like just this
I'm not
cycle,
going out.
So
today's
like a monsoon right now.
It's
tough. Blood warning for a reason, but
it's pretty and the weather has been crazy. Yesterday the power
was flickering. Yeah, definitely.
And this is downtown. We're in downtown Everett, and power flickered.
It's crazy.
Which is more surprising than out where the bee farm is. There's out in the country.
We were flickering. We were definitely flickering yesterday.
But here was more unexpected. So I think just, really having that focus on the bees. Do you keep any sort of bee journal that kind of keeps you updated?
I do. It's a bit challenging. I have done it. That's one thing that I want to get better at as I'm doing. It's a little challenging to do that while you're in the hives, specifically if you're trying to go quick. It can be challenging. So one thing that we've done is we've bought some bricks and we need to buy some more. And basically the bricks give me an indication. You design your own way that you want to use the bricks, first of all. Like there's not a universal way, but we've been putting bricks on hives that have an issue, a queen issue. That's how I am able to label, all right, this one has something going on. I can't find the queen, weak hive, etc. That's how I'm able to distinguish, okay, that's weak. And then I've done double bricks for queen ones, and I'm like, okay, we have to replace the queen kind of thing. So that's something that I have done. We're refining that process. It's not done or perfect by any means, but just using something like that to distinguish. I tried to use a Sharpie and mark things at one point, and I was like, this is not the best. And so using a brick is a great way.
Using a brick. There's a ton of bricks up underneath the trees by where the snowplow trucks are parked up top in the top lot.
Oh,
There's
okay,
some
yeah.
pallets of bricks and stuff, so you might be able to borrow some from there. But yeah, I think it was a good show, very educational.
Lots of bee information.
Lots of-
And I want to
lots of
I want to
information.
close with, someone might be out there wondering, well, you didn't mention yellow jackets. They're not bees. They are the enemy. I killed one yesterday.
So they're kind of like a Decepticon.
There you go. Or a Sith. There you go. Yeah, a Decepticon.
I'm not exactly sure what a Sith is at
Bad
this
guy.
particular point.
Bad guy. Opposite of the Jedi.
It's kind of like a Darth Vader, but just not as cool.
It's the kind
like-
of, sure, we're going to, we're going
They
to go with that.
they
We're going to go with
they
that.
made a Darth Vader who was awesome, the ultimate enemy, wonderful character,
Great character.
and then they made these Siths. Siths are kind of weak, in my opinion. It was kind of like we aren't that creative, we aren't that smart. We're just gonna make this thing called a Sith.
Yeah, it's
Sith.
not the Smiths out
It's-
there.
It's not as cool as the Emperor, right? The Emperor was just wickedly powerful
Yep.
and wickedly evil. And that was an awesome death
Somehow
character.
returned. Come on, Disney. Figure out a better solution.
I don't know how he returned, but it's so much cooler than the Sith.
He is a Sith, though.
The Sith is always one of those things that's like, that was weak sauce. I feel so disappointed in anything to do with a Sith.
Well, you heard it here
That's just
first.
what I'm gonna say.
Sith are weak, so
Vader
Come on,
rules.
Jedi.
That's all I'm gonna say. I love Darth Vader. All right.
thanks.
Teach Me Bees, episode 455 in the books. Thank you for joining.
That'd be crazy if
Follow
we had that
us
many.
on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere we're at social. I'm Dave Westcott. This is Scott the Beekeeper. This was a fabulous show. Join us every Thursday. We're here live and in person, having a great time shooting Teach Me Bees. And leave your comments in the comments box. Give us a like, give us a share if you like the show. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank you.
great day.